It's kind of interesting because a lot of the stuff with cockroaches, there's not actually a whole lot that's focused on them in commercial accounts. How are you going to take what you learn in school and how are you going to apply that to what you're going to do the rest of your life? We're doing things and we're pushing them out to the industry, but we're also listening to the industry and we're designing projects to address the needs of the industry.
I would not be on this podcast right now if it wasn't for your retreat.
One of the coolest things from this meeting is the folks in my lab, when they come out and enter the industry, they don't show up to a Pest World meeting and kind of like stand in a corner and look around because they have no knowledge of anybody who's there. They know some of the big players in the industry because they've got to sit at a round table, shoulder to shoulder with people that are leaders in the field.
This September 15th and 16th, UPMTC is heading to Oklahoma State University in Stillwater, where we're putting on a workshop in stored product pest and commodity fumigation. This is an awesome event, and we'd love to have you there. There are a few spots available, so if interested in these topics, head on over to the link in the description, click on that QR code by scanning with your phone, and be sure to sign up before the early bird pricing ends September 1st. Hope to see y'all there. Hey everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Pest. I'm your host, Jen Sweeney Ingram.
And I'm Mike Thome. On today's episode, we had the opportunity to speak with Dr. Zach DeVries of the University of Kentucky. We talked to Zach about kind of what brought him into academia and the research that's coming out of his lab and some really exciting new research that they're working on currently. So we hope you enjoy the episode.
I didn't expect Long Island, where I'm at, to be so remote. So we were just talking about the ticks that we've got out here and the boonies of Long Island and the deer for days and raccoons, all the things.
Hopefully you haven't hit any with your car or anything.
Not yet, but people have, and I've been warned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a friend who works for an insurance company, and she said, you never say that you hit a deer. You say the deer hit you.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, if she works in insurance, I trust her.
Yeah.
So growing up in Alabama, it was always funny because we had lots of armadillo down there, and I didn't realize I never actually hit one, but I've seen the videos now of them how like they can jump, like how far off the ground they can actually get their bodies, even despite their little tiny legs. So,
Can they really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It's pretty wild. Yeah.
I wonder if they would do quite significant damage to a car. Like, how hard are they when they curl up?
I mean, I think they're I don't know if you call it a shell or not, but the outside is pretty tough, but I don't think they're not big enough to do, they can crack a windshield basically, but I don't think they're going to do the damage like a deer can where it'll like total the vehicle.
Yeah. We have the spotted lanternfly here, and so we've got the nymphs right now. And I didn't realize, because we just started getting them in Nashville a couple years ago, that when you kind of go to squish them, they jump.
Yep.
Really jump. Yeah. So it took me like 5 tries to finally squish the dang thing.
I guess I have, it's a good thing we haven't seen many of them. I've only seen a few of them, and they're always, to me, because I'm only seeing a couple of them, they're really pretty and they look really neat, but I have not gotten into the thick of it where we're seeing like the hundreds and hundreds coating trees or anything like that yet.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, head up my way. They decimated my grapevines in my backyard last year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
and like in Pittsburgh 2 summers ago, they were so bad in downtown Pittsburgh that like every step you took, it was just like crunch, 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 like just dead adults everywhere. It was wild. So it's gotten pretty bad up here. Like I said, they completely decimated. I got no grapes last year.
Wow.
Just because they absolutely decimated my vines. So,
yeah,
not ideal. They are beautiful though. That's what sucks. Do you know what I mean? Like the adults are even the nymphs are kind of like a good looking insect, but the adults are beautiful, but yet just so damaging and it's unfortunate. So
yeah.
I would love to have fruit in our little yard that we have here too, but I fear for the deer. Everything wants to eat all your nice things that you're growing in your yard. So I feel for you.
Oh.
Well, thanks for joining us today, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys for inviting me.
Yeah, Jen and I got to talking, and I said, I've gotten to come down and hang out with you at the UK and stuff like that at the technical directors retreat. Honestly, since year one, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know like the Zach origin story, like how you ended up there. Like I don't know any of that stuff. So we were
Yeah.
talking about like who do we want to have as a guest on here to kind of learn their origin story. I was like, let's reach out to Zach. So,
Yeah.
um, I guess that's like the best way to start this is like what is the Zach origin story?
Yeah, that's a tricky question to answer there. There's a lot wrapped up in that. I mean, so yeah, and I really appreciate you coming down actually for the meeting for the last several years. I'm disappointed you're not going to make it this year, but hopefully we can get the timing right for you next year.
I
And
only turned 50 once, so
that's
yeah,
right.
yeah,
But
exactly.
Jen, I'm glad you're going to be able to join us this
I
year. So
know.
it's
I'm
yeah,
really excited. Thank you for
yeah,
inviting me.
yeah,
I will
certainly.
happily take Mike's place in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a really fun meeting, which I'm sure we'll get into later. But yeah, I'm really excited you'll be able to join us, and Mike will hopefully get you back on board in next year.
Absolutely.
But no, I mean, so I've been at Kentucky now for I guess 6.5 years, I think. And I'm really enjoying my position here, really enjoying the work I get to do, the things I get to do. My background is kind of it's not really unique. I feel like everybody has their own uniqueness in how they got into the field of pest management. Mine started out, I guess I graduated from high school, went to college. I actually started out as a math major. I was really good at math in high school. I loved math. I went to college and I did not that I didn't like math. I still enjoy it, but it was not the kind of thing I wanted to center my career around. So I found that out pretty early on in college. But I took a biology class, just a basic or an organismal biology class, and I loved it. The teacher there was Dr. Debbie Folkerts. I think is retired since then, but she was like amazing. Brought in every class period, she'd bring in some kind of living organism and pass it around. And this is a big class. This is like I don't know, probably 200 people or so.
Wow.
And so, but still would engage with people, would bring in specimens, let you look and hold things, all kinds of living creatures. And it was really neat. I kind of fell in love with biology at that point. So I switched gears, pursued a major in biology or zoology at the time. They changed terms of what they call the major there now. And, and really enjoyed it, really learned a lot. But I got to the end and I kind of hit another one of these like crossroad areas where I really liked biology, really liked zoology, but I just couldn't find something I wanted to do. I was looking at grad schools, I was looking at jobs, and everything I kept looking at was neat, but I couldn't find the practicality in it. I couldn't find like the why question. And not to diminish the value of some of that work, but for me, what really drove me is I wanted something that was practical, something that mattered, that had impact that I could see or feel or touch. And I just so happened to take an entomology class, like an Ent 101 or a basic entomology class at the same time. And, it wasn't like a light bulb went off instantly, but this gradual, like as I'm looking, can't find things and I'm taking an entomology class, it kind of clicked where I was like, this is great. I could do biology, but I can do so in a way or in an area where I can help people, where I can answer practical questions, where I can address concerns. So I still didn't know much about entomology. I still remember we had to find it was only like 30 different families. It wasn't, we had to make an insect collection, so it wasn't very large. And I kept finding cockroaches. I still remember this thinking, I kept bringing in small American cockroaches. I know this at the time and kept saying, is this a German cockroach? Is this a German cockroach? It's really funny looking back because I kept being told no and no and no over and over again. And I had, kind of highlighting, I had no idea what I was doing at the time, but I loved it. It was really exciting and I really got into it. So I graduate from undergrad and I, happened to pair up with the lab, Dr. Art Appel at Auburn University. And just happened that he was looking for a student at the time. And I was kind of broadly interested in entomology. I knew I wanted something to apply, but I didn't know if that would be like cropping systems, urban structural forest. But I knew I wanted it to be applied, impactful. It just so happened he's the urban entomologist there and he was looking for a student. So I got paired up with him and kind of got into the field and really fell in love with it at that point. Really like loved the pest management aspect of it, loved the insect aspect of it. and then went on to NC State, did my PhD there with Dr. Kobe Shaw, really got deeper into the field of pest management and started, I think, asking some more, at least for me, some more deeper questions about, why pest management, what am I doing with this? Why does it matter? What's the impact? What's the value? And that's kind of led me to where I am now and kind of started forming some of the questions I'm asking and some of the things that we're doing as a lab, but trying to stay tightly connected, deeply rooted in the industry and the needs of the pest management industry. So that's my very quick synopsis of my background.
Yeah, I love how you actually got to be a part. So, both, let's see, NC State, we visited there with UPMTC and got to see Dr. Shaw, and he's amazing.
Yeah.
So, I can see maybe how he sparks interest in his students because
Yeah.
he is such an amazing person that puts out really, really great research. Um, but you had the opportunity to see applied entomology and specifically urban entomology from as a student. And we say on the show all the time that it's becoming more rare as, departments aren't getting the funding that they need.
Mhm.
Um, so can you talk to us a little bit about how you got into becoming a professor and what sort of things do you do for your students to spark their interest in urban entomology?
Yeah, it's a great question. I honestly, when I was working with Kobe, I got to the end or was getting to the end of that, and I was interested in academia. I was interested in continuing to do some of the research projects we do, asking my own questions, setting my own agenda, that kind of thing. But I was pretty open. Like when I got to the end, I was actually looking at industry positions as well, both with chemical manufacturers and with pest control companies. And I was, there are a lot of elements. It's kind of funny. A lot of what I do, my appointments, research and extension, and a lot of the extension activities I do line up with the kind of things that you do in a technical director's position. There's a lot of overlap, a lot of similarities there. And I was looking around at different places, and it just so happened the time when I was looking for jobs, there were a couple of positions that were opening up. So I had applied, interviewed for several things, and was, fortunate enough to get here, but I'm really glad I did. I've really enjoyed and appreciate the work that the work that I get to do here. One of the things I didn't, I guess, expect when I first started this, but I've found a love about my position is the working with students and training students. It's been, I'm not that long into my role here, but it's, coming on 7 years. I've had a number of students graduate, and it's really neat to see them kind of come in, get their feet set, kind of get into this, get their feet set, graduate, and then move out. And a lot of them are in the industry right now working. It's kind of neat to see that growth and see them come from where they were, and then just to see them out there doing great jobs. It's been like, I guess selfishly, it's been very rewarding for me to get to see that. And I hope I made impacts on them, but I like getting to see their growth and development and transition to the industry. Yeah.
Wow. And thank you for that. That's
Yeah.
awesome. It
Yeah.
is great to
Yeah.
see young people enter the industry because they can move up so much and it's just so fulfilling.
It's really it's kind of funny when I talk to my colleagues that are other entomologists working in various disciplines, and you get this like backlog of people becoming, you graduate with your degrees, and then when you get to the end after you finish your PhD, there's postdoctoral research positions. Postdocs, a common term that people use for it. And other disciplines have this like backlog. So like they're sitting in a postdoc for years and years, kind of waiting and hoping that something opens up eventually. And I look at like within urban entomology, and we have the opposite problem. Like when I've looked to find people who want to be a postdoc, I don't find very many, because if they want a job and they're willing to, if they're flexible with where they are in the country, there are jobs popping up all over the place. And I know, like Mike, your company, Chad sent out emails now. There's hirings going on all over the place. If you're flexible with where you live and what you do, and can kind of fill into various roles and niches, there are so many opportunities, which is I always use as a selling point to people when they're kind of thinking about careers. It's like, I get it. You can come in and do things that are exciting at the time, but think longer term. How is this good? How are you going to take what you learn in school, and how are you going to apply that to what you're going to do the rest of your life? Because you're hopefully not going to be here as a student forever. You're going to have to graduate and go on and do something eventually. Yeah.
I think that, Zach, your lab and the research that gets done in your lab has been kind of has become very much a go-to when we talk about like what's new, what am I learning, what am I teaching our technicians out
Yeah.
there, especially the work that you guys did with repellency. With was it
Yeah.
John Lynn a couple years ago?
Yeah, we've had a couple people.
Yeah,
Jonathan worked on it. Sadeep.
yeah.
We've had a number of people get to work in that area. Yep.
So you guys are really starting to become that kind of like go-to lab for a
Yeah.
lot of this research that we use in the industry. So talk to me a little bit about, if you wouldn't mind, the technical directors retreat that you guys came up with that to kind of build a bridge between academia and the industry. Like, what was the impetus for that? And
Yeah, so when we first, the idea kind of sparked. So when I got here to Kentucky, I really had thought about where am I going to ground my program, what I want to do, and again, rooting it within the pest management industry was really important to me. And so one of the things we noticed, I think Jen, you kind of mentioned this earlier, is there was maybe a little bit of a disconnect. I mean, and I'm not saying that it's in all areas or all people or all projects, but pest management was maybe moving slightly one direction and academia, urban entomology is maybe moving slightly different. And not to devalue the work. I think there's some amazing work that's been done, but it might not be rooted in the needs of the industry always. And so what we said is that this should be a circle or a bi-directional conversation where essentially we're doing things and we're pushing them out to the industry, but we're also listening to the industry and we're designing projects to address the needs of the industry. So both ways communication, rather than us just show up, do something that we think is useful, pass it along and hope that the industry can find some value in it. And I think that concept, it was attractive. I mean, or at least I like to think so. When we started kind of brainstorming this thing, I would also be remiss if I didn't mention Dr. Angela Sierras, who is a former, lab manager, research scientist in my program, who was kind of instrumental in us developing this. When we started designing this, we had multiple conversations with a whole bunch of people that we knew in technical director type roles. I mean, we call it the technical director's retreat, but it's really just anybody who's passionate and interested and invested in moving pest management forward retreat. It's that's too long of a name, I suppose, to use.
gonna come up with an
Um,
acronym, right?
that's right. That's right. I'll come up with a cool acronym. But but we met and we talked about this, and I was kind of half expecting people to be like, I don't know, maybe that's interesting. And every single person we met with said, "This sounds great. We would love to be a part of this, or we'd love to help out." In terms of generating these ideas and helping you guys kind of frame the work that you do so that it's impactful, because it's beneficial to both parties. It helps us do things that matter. It helps the people who need stuff us to give them things that they can actually use. So we started with that. We got good feedback. We got really good buy-in, and we from the beginning to now, the model of the meeting has been, if you can get yourself here, we'll cover everything else. We'll take care of things. If you can cover your travel and your hotel, we'll take care of the rest. And I started out paying it out of my own money here. We've since gotten some sponsors for this, but but that meeting has been, to this day, is probably one of the most, I feel like it's one of the most fun things we get to do. And it's one of the most valuable things I think that I do, because it does. And we'll probably talk about some of the projects we're working on. And I would say almost every project that we're doing now or have done has this meeting has had some impact on that. There's been discussions, project refinement, new ideas that we weren't even thinking about that's guided things that we're doing now. But I would say beyond the science value of it, one of the coolest things from this meeting is the folks in my lab, when they come out and enter the industry, they don't show up to a pest world meeting and kind of like stand in a corner and look around because they have no knowledge of anybody who's there. They know some of the big players in the industry. They know some of the people who've been around for decades. They could walk up and at least say hi to them or be familiar with them, because they've got to sit at a round table, shoulder to shoulder with people that are leaders in the field. And I think it's been I'm speaking out for them, but in my mind, it's been really valuable for them to get that exposure. It's something a lot of people I don't think get, especially at student stage. You just don't get the exposure to folks in the industry where you can start transitioning to them as like these, godlike figures to basically colleagues. And you can transition to a position where you can have a conversation or seek advice or help from them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's huge for young people.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, one of my favorite things, and I know one of UPMTC in general's favorite things, is when we go to the universities, getting to talk with the students and have like a roundtable discussion with them and see what they're studying, what they're learning, and then just having them see faces that already are in the industry so that they can kind of imagine a different avenue than maybe what they were expecting or thinking
Yeah.
that they might get into.
Yeah, and no, and the work you guys do too. It's really neat to see. I always love getting to see the photos of you guys getting to go different places, and it's really neat. I mean, you guys as a group get to travel the country and really get some neat exposure to all these different labs and programs, and get to, I mean, get a good view of what's going on out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Zach, don't downplay the benefit that it has for us as
Yeah.
well. Do you know what I mean? Like it's an opportunity for us as folks in the industry to get together and share ideas. To be honest with you, I would not be on this podcast right now if it
Yeah.
wasn't for your retreat
Oh,
because that's where I met Christian and Pat for the first time.
yeah.
And, being
Wow.
involved in that meeting led to Christian saying, "Hey, Mike, did you want to join UPMTC?" You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So there is a ton of benefit for us on the industry side, not just with the research that comes out, but it's one thing to network at like Pest World. It's another thing to sit in a room for a couple days and exchange ideas and really have some thoughtful conversations. So
Yeah.
I would say that whatever y'all get out of it, we get just as much out of
Yeah.
that meeting. So
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I mean, that means a lot, and I'm glad to hear that it's got multiple benefits and things that maybe aren't even being seen all the time. I really do think it is a neat spot. I mean, it's a neat place because I've served on NPMA's technical committee for a few years. And there's a lot of really cool discussions, ideas that go on within some of these various meetings. But what I've found with this one, at least in the first couple of years, I think it's persisted since, is if you sit people in a room and you give them an hour or two to talk, people will share some things and they'll ask some questions. But the longer you go, people start, I'd say, letting their guard down, but not in a bad way. People start becoming themselves basically and opening up and having real and frank conversations. People that maybe are a little bit closed off or maybe aren't as willing to speak up always. When you've sat next to somebody for 7 hours, it's the end of the day, you start kind of speaking like a normal person, and that really does matter. It helps you connect with people a little bit better. And that's, I think, having this be not just an hour or two or just meeting on Zoom or something like that. I think it does. It helps you really connect with folks. And I feel like those connections seem like, I never know who knows each other beforehand or who doesn't. But it does seem like there are some relationships that kind of form out of there where people now find other people they can reach out to for help or advice or collaborations in the future. So,
true story. I told you that I couldn't make it this year because my son's moving into
yeah.
college and I'm turning 50. And I told my wife, I'm like, hey, I have to go to the University of Kentucky that week. I'm like, we'll just do stuff when I get back. And she was like, no, you're not doing that. You know what I mean? Like you're gonna be here to move your son into college. So Zach, it's the only reason I'm missing is because of those things. So
Mike, you get a pass. You've been there for 5 years. It's surprising because when we started this, I also expected people to come for a year or two. And I don't want to say, get bored. That maybe too extreme. But I figured people would get kind of tired of it. And I'm not. Maybe some people have, but it's grown every year.
yep,
We have a healthy problem to have now, which is we are expanding past our ability to sit at the table as a round table, and we're going to have to do breakout groups because it's going to be too hard. We're up to, I think this year we're going to be 35 people with some folks like yourself, Mike, and a couple others that weren't able to make it. We're still growing. And I'm not broadly, I guess after the podcast, maybe I am, but I'm not broadly advertising this. I'm not really turning folks down, but I'm not, out there promoting this thing. And it's kind of kept growing, but it's been really neat. And it's neat to see people want to keep coming back because that's kind of the best sign for me that, hey, this does have some value and this is having some positive impacts on the industry. Yeah.
Well, I am a little bummed because, Mike, this would be the second time we've got to see each other in person.
yeah. We've been friends for and done this for over a year. We've been friends for longer than
Yeah.
that. We've actually only met in person one time, and that was at Purdue this year. So
Yep.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Very cool.
Gosh, but Zach, could you actually go over some of the questions that you hope for us attendees to tackle while we're at this year's retreat?
Oh man, I'm gonna have to I'm gonna have to think off the top of my head here and try to remember. So what we usually do, the way we structure the meeting, is I kind of poll people who are coming. I get some ideas, and I meet with a couple of folks. I added a steering committee, which is actually some of you. So Ashley's on that as well. I can't remember if Mark or Ben Hoddle have been on the podcast, but we've got a couple of them that have helped me kind of coalesce or sift through all these ideas, and we've come up with a couple of topics. A couple of them that I'm actually really excited about. One of them is looking at pest management in other countries. And this is an area where I can safely say that my knowledge is very limited. But it's a neat topic because it's essentially looking at what are other places around the world doing, and what things could we maybe be implementing, pushing, researching, exploring that are things that are working other places that we're not actively engaged in. And so I'm kind of really excited. This is one I believe, because I know Ashley was on the podcast a few weeks ago, or I don't know how time progresses in podcast world, but on previous episodes. And, and she actually brought this up after a couple of international trips about some of the neat things that she observed or saw overseas related to pest control. And so that one is going to be really exciting to kind of explore these new areas and ideas. Another one's looking at commercial accounts. This is one we look at research a lot of time. A lot of the effort that we do, especially with cockroaches and bedbug work, we tend to put a lot of our emphasis in low-income multifamily housing areas that tend to have some of the more severe problems, tend to be more challenging to deal with, resource limited. It's kind of interesting because a lot of the stuff with cockroaches, there's not actually a whole lot that's focused on them like in commercial accounts. And so looking at some of the nuances and some of the areas where research can maybe help out with some of the unique challenges in those environments. And I would say expanding it beyond just roaches, it could be other pests as well. But some of the unique situations there, and my hope is to identify some of the challenges that we, researchers who aren't in these kind of accounts all the time, some of the things that folks are seeing that we can maybe tackle or assist with on the research side. We usually do one of the other ones. We have exciting updates and trends in the industry. And so that one usually is kind of a grab bag of random stuff, whoever's leading it. But essentially getting to look into what's new, what's out there, what are people seeing, what's popping up, what questions do folks have, maybe kind of a grab bag or a mix of topics to be discussed. So those are at least a few of them that we're going to get into this year. And usually it's kind of neat because we have a schedule, but it's a pretty loosely followed schedule, which I really like, because when we get into a conversation, if it's going really well, we just keep going with it. We keep moving along, and we adjust our schedule as needed so we can have good conversations and let them continue.
Yeah. So speaking of research, what are y'all working on right now?
Yeah, so a lot of different things. I would say one, if I'm focusing, if I wanted to give you kind of a high level, idea of some of the areas we're working in, one of the big things is making pest management more sustainable. And so looking for solutions, that are both going to work, but actually are implementable, things that can actually be done and people can continue doing them. So I'll focus a lot of our lab's work. We've kind of focused pretty heavily on cockroaches and bed bugs. That's been and German cockroaches in particular. That's been kind of our bread and butter for the last, 6 or 7 years. We've dabbled in other things, but that's been our main focus. One of the things with cockroaches, particularly German cockroaches, we've had pretty good tools for several decades now to combat them. I stand by the statement right now. I can walk into most of the apartments that we work in, and I can usually get them under control, sanitation, no sanitation, with the products we have. The problem is to do that is incredibly expensive and very difficult to maintain itself. It doesn't tend to last or sustain. And we'll get into this, but there's a multitude of reasons for that. So we have good strategies, but we don't actually have them being implemented in communities and persisting over time. So what we've been kind of focusing on pretty heavily is looking at what are the barriers, what is keeping us from these good sustainable solutions, and what does a sustainable solution actually look like? What's a good pest management program? What is something that is both effective but also practical? And I'm not gonna, we're not gonna have the answer to this, and this has been a decades long problem. I would say if I'm looking at my career, I would hope that when I am winding my career down, I'm hoping that these problems are better than when I started. But I'm not so naive to say that we're going to fix these in the next year or two. These are really complicated things. But I do think that there's some stuff that can be addressed. So things that we're working on in terms of barriers, one of the main focuses, one of the main things I've been doing is looking at ineffective products. What's sitting on a shelf that instead of somebody working with a professional, what is something that's accessible to them right now that they're going and picking up and using to, in this case, ineffectively control pests. So we've done a lot of work, this is dating back to my time as a PhD student to stuff we're doing right now. We've looked at things like bug bombs or total release foggers, which don't work at all for cockroach control, but they do a lot of poisoning and explosions and other things. It's actually quite interesting because California, I believe, is actually in the process of reevaluating these. So finally, after me working on this maybe a decade or so, somebody has picked it up and is taking a second look at these products, which are just little, mini bombs basically waiting to go off in homes that aren't actually controlling the pests they say they control. But things like bug bombs, things like your classic cans of Raid or other bug sprays, ready to use liquids that you're spraying the perimeter of your house with, all the way to most recently working with some of the essential oils that you can pick up off the shelves, and essentially finding all of these, which prominently advertise a big old picture of a cockroach on the front, do not do anything to actually control cockroaches. They might kill them if you hit them directly with it. But, the classic joke with this is so does a shoe or so does a piece of duct tape or a fly swatter. There's a lot of things that will kill things directly. We use pesticides for residual activity. We need these to get to the pest when we can't be there all the time, so the pest can walk over, bump into them, and die ultimately when we're not there to actually be physically there to kill them. So looking at some of these barriers and I would say probably the most interesting, those are kind of the more, hands-on testing barriers we've been looking at. The other one is looking at some of the RFPs and the requests for proposals or the invitations for bids for pest control contracts in some of these multifamily housing communities. I've been, both excited and also kind of shocked when looking at these. We've been collecting these. We've collected, I think, well over 100 now from complexes throughout the U.S. These are housing authorities throughout the U.S. in terms of how do they manage pest control. And these are ones that are not doing it in-house. It's ones that are contracting it out. And what's been amazing for these is how poorly written they are. So you're essentially setting yourself up for failure when you have a request for proposals that does not ask for what you actually need. And so the example I'll give is a lot of these things require no actual reduction in pest pressure from these. They will say all kinds of things about how many times you have to be there, how many times you have to spray things, how you have to show up, but they will say nothing about actually eliminating the pest problem or even reducing the pest problem. So it's amazing because you can be in full compliance with your contractor proposals, and all you got to do is show up once a month, spray something, and leave. If you do that, that is fulfilling the contract, which is not to say it's why we're having failures, but that is a huge barrier to success if we allow people to be in compliance if they're not actually reducing the pest problems that are in these homes. So we've been exploring these and kind of, one of the things we're hoping to get out of this is by documenting all these problems and issues is come up with a list of best practices and start working with some of these housing authorities to essentially refine these. So essentially, if you just ask for simple things that, hey, we want to see what the pest pressure looks like, month over month, year over year, we want to have some documentation that what you did, other than your word saying it looks better, something that actually shows us, hey, you were catching, 30 bugs this month. Now we're only catching 15 this month. Something that shows a trend in the right direction or corrective actions if we're not seeing that kind of trend. And it may sound small, and I'm not so naive to say that this is going to solve pest problems in low-income housing or affordable housing, but I think it's a start. I think if you can start with a good request for proposals, good contracts. Now you can start holding people accountable for their actions. And I think companies who maybe aren't inclined to do things the right way, which takes time and effort, if they're going to be held accountable for it, they're probably going to spend less time on those kind of accounts and move elsewhere. Leaves more room for the people who do want to do it correctly to come in. It's going to be more expensive, but it's a lot easier to bid higher on a job if everybody is bidding for the same thing versus somebody bidding for doing it correctly and somebody else bidding for doing it incorrectly. So, that's one of the, some of the barriers we're trying to tackle, some of the things that we're looking at as more sustainable approaches. We've got two right now that we're pursuing. One of them is looking at proactive management strategies. This is some work that a student in my lab, Bandana, has been working on for a while now. We've done some lab testing and we're hoping to now roll this out into the field. The concept here is when we go in and we do evaluations or assessments of either new properties or current properties, we go in. If they're clear, we don't trap anything, we don't see anything, we usually walk out the door and leave. We don't tend to do anything else. In classic IPM, we'll say, oh, there's no need to apply a pesticide if there's no pressure, if you're not seeing anything. One of the concepts we came up with this project is essentially if we're going into high risk environments, so analogous to termites in South Florida type thing. If we're in an area where the likelihood of this pest showing up, so low-income multifamily housing, cockroaches it's a high probability you might bump into them over the years. Why not go ahead and do something if you can apply, whether it's bait or some other type of treatment? Why not go ahead and treat that unit proactively with some kind of residual, whether it's a bait or a spray, an IGR, something that is going to prevent the establishment of that pest when it eventually does show up into that home. The cost is minuscule. The time effort is very small if you're already inspecting units. But the effects can be pretty profound. And so the data we've had, at least in the lab, with some large arenas, I say lab studies, but we've been doing these in kiddie pools, essentially. So pretty large laboratory environments actually have been pretty exciting. I mean, we're putting these things out. We're preventing establishment. We're stopping roaches from spreading into new environments just by, in this case, she's been exploring gel baits, and we're going to expand it to more than that eventually. But just the simple addition of a couple dots of gel bait, you're talking pennies, all of a sudden is stopping things that wander into that new environment from ever getting a foothold there. So it's very early. We need to do more field testing. I'm not saying that we should roll this out, but I think it's something we need to look at. And I think we already do this in a lot of other arenas. Termites are my classic example. It's like if you have a home and you live in a southern state along the coast, you might already have a baiting system put in without termites ever being present in your home. Low impact on the environment. Usually don't have things leaching out. You have it ready to go. So when the termites ultimately do show up, they're hitting your bait and not invading and infesting your structure. The question is, why aren't we doing that with other things? Proactive approaches are way easier than getting rid of something that's already established. So that's one of our attempts to make something maybe more sustainable. I would say the other one is looking at things like willingness to adopt, willingness to to go after new strategies. So actually understanding the people dynamic of these complex situations. We got the pest part down to some extent. We don't always fully understand what people are actually willing to do. So we want to make sure that if we start pushing strategies, that these are things that people are actually going to implement. So doing a lot of survey work, working with residents to see what their willingness is to adopt new behaviors. And if we can provide them some information like, hey, if you don't do this, it might be hurting you or your family. There's health consequences, other things. Can we maybe nudge them in the right direction, make them more willing to adopt some of these behaviors? But again, looking at these things that are not necessarily going to cost a ton of money, but things that might make pest management more adoptable and more sustainable within communities. So sorry, that's a lot of information to kind of cover some of the big things we're trying to tackle right now. And these are long multi-year projects. So certainly not something we're going to have answers for immediately, but they're exciting to me. They're really, for me at least, it's a really exciting time because I think these are projects that have some value to them. And not to say this, I mean, over my career, I've done some projects where it's like, it's neat and it's interesting, but then it's kind of like, all right, well, that one's going to be done and it's probably not going to have a long lasting impact. I think some of these could. At least I'm optimistic that these might have some impact or maybe change the way we think about pest management a little bit.
I'm actually blown away
Yeah.
because you mentioned the similarities between kind of what you do in your lab does and a technical director. And I'm
Yeah.
going, oh my gosh, if I had the resources and the students and the capability of being able to allocate these different projects to people, how amazing
Yeah.
could even a mid-sized company that I came from do? And, over the course of 5 years or so,
Yeah.
how much it could change. And I just think Kentucky's very lucky to have you, and
Well,
so are the rest of us. So I'm very excited to attend this retreat because I think I'm already going to learn quite a lot.
well, thank you. That's very, very kind words. Yeah.
Zach, what are your other, I would say, big things you get involved in is the University of Kentucky short course.
Yeah.
I know, like for myself, I had like bucket list places that I had hoped to speak someday. Purdue, Pest World, but
Yeah.
short course was one of them, and I got that chance a couple years ago. So, uh, talk to us a little bit about short course because I know you're super involved in that project as well.
Yeah, so the UK pest control short course. This is it's funny because the name is a historical name that has been kept around for a long time. It's not a short course anymore. It's
It's-
it's a half day, a full day, and another half day. So it's actually a pretty pretty long meeting. But this is a meeting this will be year 55. So
Wow.
I've had it for a few years now. My predecessor, Dr. Mike Potter, had it for I think 30 years, and then his predecessors before him had it. It it's a really cool meeting. The thing, and I'm a little biased, so you can take that with a grain of salt. But what I really like about the meeting, and there's a couple of these around the country, but this is a meeting where at the university we have I say full control. We do this in lots of collaboration with folks in the industry, the Kentucky Pest Management Association. We work hand in hand to develop this, but we have a really strong. We're not participants in this meeting. I'm not just showing up, giving a talk, shaking some hands and leaving. We're involved in it from every element of the design and implementation of this. We're involved in it. And what I really like about that is it allows us to keep the meeting focused on advancing pest management and getting the best training possible to our attendees. So it's really cool because when I hear good talks when I'm at meetings, when I see good speakers, when I hear interesting ideas or concepts, we can reach out and get those people. And we run this meeting. This is run as part of my job at the university. We're not looking to turn a profit. We're looking to get the best education possible. So we really don't have any restrictions on who we bring in for speakers. So it allows us to go out and get some really cool speakers. You're talking about new ideas, innovative approaches, maybe a different way of training on a topic that our attendees haven't heard before. And Kentucky's a state where we have a lot of our attendees who come to this meeting. I would say 95% of them or more have never been to a big like an NPMA type meeting. They've never gone to these multi-state or national meetings. And so it's a really neat opportunity to bring in new concepts and new ideas to them and get them some really good training. I would also like to say, I mean, I think it kind of keeps them, you know, not that they're necessarily implementing everything that's brand new, but it keeps people in Kentucky kind of on the forefront of what's out there. Some of the new things that some of these small companies that we have in the state. Kentucky, we have a handful of large-ish, I would say, companies, but we have a lot of small companies in the state, a lot of, 5, person groups, 10-person groups or smaller within the state. And it makes it a really interesting place because this meeting can ultimately have a lot of value because it provides training to them. It's things that they otherwise would never see. And if we ran this where we brought in just, let's say, just myself or maybe a couple of people that are only in Kentucky sharing the same things every day, not to say that they wouldn't learn things, but we're exposing them to ideas that are, east to west, north to south throughout the United States, things that they may have not seen or heard before, but things that can change their business, things that can change the way that they approach things, and how they, how they're approaching management. So it's a really great meeting. I've really enjoyed getting to be a part of it. It keeps me meetings like this, the technical directors retreat, some of the other training opportunities I do with the state. It it really helps me keep me grounded. That's some of my favorite things I get to do is when I'm at these meetings. It's, it's a lot of work to run them, but I love getting to sit and talk with people over lunch or at other opportunities, and get to hear like what are their problems, what are they actually experiencing, get feedback on things that they heard in some of the talks, where they basically will say it's like, I can't really do 2/3 of that because of X, Y, and Z. Because it gets me thinking, it's like, okay, we got the right idea. How do we actually get that to you? How do we make this something that your company or your business could actually benefit from? So, anyways, I've really enjoyed running the meeting, and it's been a pleasure to be able to put that on and get to meet a lot of people in the process and learn more myself about pest management.
Yeah. You know, I was reflecting on what you said earlier about kind of how your come up story and how you were so good at math, but then it wasn't really applied enough. And you were always searching for the thing that you could really apply your skills. But then it, at the same time, amazes me how much of a social creature you seem to be. And, and to run a lab with how many students do you have now?
Yes, we've downsized. I grew too big. We've got 3 students and a postdoc now. We were at, well, technically 4, because I have another student who's a distance student, doing her PhD, actually remotely doing her PhD. It's kind of a
Oh,
cool opportunity for her and for me. But yeah, we had grown to a point where I think I had 7 or 8 students at postdoc, and I've got young kids right now, and it was it was a very hectic time for a couple of months there, and so we've kind of dialed it back a little bit so we can, can survive.
wow. So
Yeah.
what are some of the things that you've learned just going through your journey and becoming now you're an assistant professor?
Yep. Yep.
What
So
have been some
I've
of the pain points and just hardest parts, and then again, the most rewarding parts so far in your journey?
So the rewarding ones are probably the easier for me to. Let's start with the positive
Oh,
first, right? So
yeah.
so the rewarding, I think I may have mentioned it earlier, but like and I'll say it again though because it's really important to me. I love getting to see people come in and then grow and then go out and do cool things. Like that's been, and I've gotten to see that now, even over the course of 6.5 years, 7 years now, I've gotten to actually see that radiate. It's really cool. I have a former student named Isabel who she works for JT Eaton now. It was really funny because I gave up. I went up to Canada and gave a talk at their meeting. It was back in March, and I don't know a whole lot of people from Canada, just a handful. So I was walking around the meeting, but I don't really know anybody. I'm just walking the exhibit hall, and I walk by JT Eaton's booth, and I'm like, wait a second, I know you. It's like, so I didn't even know she was going to be at the meeting,
Wow.
but bumped into her there. It was just one of those cool moments to see somebody who's win the lab, trained, graduated, has gone on, and then now she's doing her own thing and being very successful in the industry. I just happened to bump into her as she's at a meeting up there. So that's been really rewarding. I mean, I'll say, some of the projects we're getting to do. I mean, some of the things this meeting now, the technical directors retreat, it's been around for, this will be year 6. We're far enough along where projects have come in, been refined, designed, generated by this meeting, come out and been finished. And it's neat to see that. It's neat to be able to point to these meetings. We did some work with bait contamination. That was a topic that got brought up. It got refined at the meeting. It was shared at the meeting. And then we've now published that, and it's come out. I think it'll be in the next print edition of PCT magazine. But it's been really cool to see projects like that go from like an idea all the way to completion. So
Mhm.
that's been really cool. On the challenges side, I think it's the time commitment. I mean, I think this is time management or balancing times and work-life balance, all those fun things. I always joke with people, Jonalyn Gordon, a former PhD student who's now a faculty member at the University of Florida. I get to talk, I talked with her about that when she was here, and now I get to talk with her about it as she's taking on a faculty role. That
Cool.
it's really hard. It's a you have to intentionally carve out some time, but it's very difficult when you're in this kind of role because essentially your students they're kind of like your kids. At least that's the way I treat them.
Mhm.
And so when there's a problem, I don't necessarily get to say, well, it's 5 o'clock on a Friday. I'm turning it off. I'll see you guys at 8 a.m. on Monday. If I get a call on Saturday because somebody came in over the weekend and one of their experiments has failed or there's a major problem or something, I can't ignore that it's the same thing as a parent. Your kid calls, it's like you're not just gonna turn off the parenting mode.
Mhm.
And so in this situation, it's like, got a lot of, students, and it's like working with them, being there to meet their needs and making sure that I'm accessible and can help them deal with problems. It's really important to me to be able to do that. And so I think it's been rewarding, but it also can be really challenging, especially as the lab grew. We got lots of people. There's always, I got further and further away from the actual science. I was doing a lot of, managing, putting out fires, solving problems constantly, which I enjoy, but it was, it was very hectic. And so it can be a bit of a challenge. Yeah. I'll say the other one that comes to mind is and I guess I'm in maybe a better position than some are. We've been lucky enough, fortunate enough to have good funding with our program. Money's always an issue. I mean, we're always, the students we have are not free. They don't pay anything, but we pay for them for a stipend and for their tuition, and it's
Mhm.
very costly. And so, while I want to train as many people as my time permits, I've always got to kind of balance that with resources and make sure that we're generating enough money. And we've been fortunate enough to get grants from, NIH, HUD, and also get money from the industry, working with chemical manufacturers for testing and development of products. But it's hard, it's kind of a never ending game of making sure. And so I think that's one area that, like, at least for me, kind of always kind of keeps me up at night thinking about this, making sure that I've got everybody covered and that I can take care of people and can kind of get them from start to finish. Those are just maybe some of
Yeah.
the challenges, but I will say again, the benefits of seeing people go on and do great things kind of far outweighs those challenges. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the reason I ask is because you're the first professor that we have interviewed.
Oh,
And so I was thinking about just the role of a professor, assistant professor.
yeah.
I don't know. Is it assistant
Well, so
professor?
you go assistant to associate to full
Okay.
professor, and so
Okay.
I'm at the associate level. I've paid my dues and I've gotten tenure, so I've made it far enough where I can take a little bit of a breath because
Oh,
it's a
good.
little bit harder to get rid of me now. So
Thank you
yeah,
for clarifying because I've never
I don't think you
understood
have to
that.
worry about them getting rid of you anytime
yeah.
soon, Zach. I
No.
think you're good.
But the thing that amazes me is that you have to have such an insane skill set where it's I'm very envious of your math skill. I keep going back to that because I was horrible at statistics and it was my downfall in grad
Yeah.
school. But like good in that way, good in the academic regard, good at teaching, and then you're reaching out to the public. Like you just have to do, and then grant writing. Oh my God. It's just you have to be a circle person in my mind to do what you do. So it
It's yeah, it's a
must be
it's a lot. I mean, I appreciate you covering all of that because it is. I mean, there's a lot of different hats we have to wear depending on who we're working with or what role we have to play at that given day. But I think where the math comes in, one of the things I feel like is a strength of mine, and this is, most people would maybe tie to their like immense knowledge of biology or how strong they are as an academic. And I was a good student. I think I did fine, but I feel like I'm a really organized person. I'm very good at logistics. And so if I had to go back in a second life, I would do something where I'm managing logistics or something along those lines. Cause I feel like that's kind of what you have to do is you have to triage things. I have a massive work to-do list where I'm constantly like moving pieces around. Every student, you have to kind of organize things for each of them. Each one of them is tackling a project. You have to kind of track all of that. It's funny because I don't know, maybe my students will actually hear this at some point, but it's funny because when they come in, sometimes I'll have a student will walk in and they'll just start typing. It's like, well, should I be testing A or should I be testing B? And I have to usually be like, hold on a second. Can you give me like a 30-second or a 60-second synopsis of what we're talking about right now? Because I've been through like 3 meetings and I don't even know what's going on right now. I have to
yeah.
back up a second there. But I like I actually take pleasure in the logistics. My email is very meticulously organized, and I think if I didn't do that, I would have a very hard time keeping up with all the things that are going on all the time because it's just never ending.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I bet.
yeah,
I think one of the other things that you talked about getting your students in front of the technical directors retreat, but also like you've done a really good job making sure that your students are involved in like NPMA and Pi Chi Omega and all of that stuff. Like one of my favorite things at Pest World is your students get an opportunity usually to get up in front of the group and kind of explain what they're working on, their projects and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
Was that intentional, Jimmy? Was that
Yeah.
organic? Did you just come from working with NPMA and stuff, or did you come to it with the mindset like, no, I want to make sure that I get them as much opportunity to be out there as possible?
Yeah, I certainly don't want to take credit away from the opportunities that various places have provided and the interest of the students. You know, when I bring on students, a lot of them I look for people with a passion for this or an interest in pest management. But yeah, I mean to your point, I think some of this for me is intentional. My goal when I train students is to make them well prepared to help out the industry in some way, shape, form, or fashion. The best way to do that is get exposed to the industry. So we do a bunch of things. We do the technical directors retreat, which is really good for them to get to know people who in roles that might be similar to what they hold one day. But it's also things like speaking at regional events. So a lot of my students go and speak for the Kentucky Pest Management Association or the surrounding states, the Indiana Pest Management Association, Illinois, West Virginia, Tennessee. I try and get them opportunities. You know, for me, maybe it serves two purposes. One of those purposes is it lets me spend a little bit less of my time traveling and having to go places all the time. But I think it's really nice for them. I think Kobe gave me some of those opportunities when I was at NC State, and I try and do that for my students is making sure that they get an opportunity to go speak at some of these platforms and get their feet wet and understand what it is to give a talk and to go up there. And, I look back at some of my talks I gave maybe 10 or 15 years ago, and I'm kind of like, oh, I can't believe I gave that at a pest control meeting because that's not the right design. But you learn from it and you grow. And I can look at my talks and I can see growth and development. So I try. You can't do that without actually going to these meetings and meeting with folks and giving talks. So I try and give them those opportunities. And NPMA has been a really good one. They've had their intern program for a number of years. It was not around or fully formed when I was a student or just initiating, but now it's got a really good reputation. And I love getting my students to go there. It's actually kind of funny because a lot of times when they speak at the intern showcases, you get a lot of folks that are at the technical directors retreat who've already heard the stuff before because they're sharing it. But it's neat because they also know some of the folks in the audience when they're speaking. But I really like getting them those opportunities. And those are things I make a point about. That my job is not just the research. Students aren't just numbers and they're not just things. These are people. My job is to train them and allow them to be as best prepared as they can to go on and do the things that they want to do and hopefully help out the industry. And I think it's kind of funny. I think about the NPMA, the intern program. There's a time I think they're distributing it maybe more evenly, but there's a couple of years back where it ended up being like half or 2/3 of the interns were people from my lab, and it was very funny when I looked at it, and I was very proud to see it, but it was also kind of funny because I'm like, where is everybody? We got to get more people in this program. I can't be the only one sending folks here. We've got to get more people getting their students opportunities for these things, so that they can grow and develop. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, one of the big things with UPMTC is that bridging the gap between industry and students. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for what you do.
Yeah. Certainly.
One thing I did want to ask for the pest management professionals that are watching, in regards to your research, and Mike mentioned your repellency stuff. And one of the videos I saw of you on YouTube, you were talking
Oh,
about bait contamination and the
okay.
idea that some PMPs may think that their treatment for roaches is not working because, quote unquote, their bait or their product was contaminated. Can you speak to that a little bit and your work with that?
Yeah. So that's been one of the more fun projects we've done over the years here. So that was some work that's been led by Ben Grady. He's a current PhD student, actually current PhD student, but will be graduating soon. So anybody listening or watching, looking for a good person to step into a technical role, you should give him a look.
Okay.
But some work that he did. This myth had been floating around for a while that basically if baits touched anything, they were unusable. And to be honest with you, I would say it's been kind of used as a crutch to kind of blame treatment failures. So when baits aren't working, we say, oh, well, the client must have sprayed it with X, Y, and Z, or, oh, maybe it got hit with something. That's why it's failing. We had, I would say, honestly, we had actively observed just by chance some stuff we played with in the lab that the cockroaches did not seem to care at all. This is all anecdotal, but we just looked at them and we're like, they don't seem like they care at all if there's pesticide or cleaner or other things on there. So we decided to put that to the test. And so we took a number of different, a couple of different baits And then we also took a number of different pesticide products, different cleaners, caustic things like bleach, Windex, liquid multi-surface cleaners, things like that. And we everything we could think might actually show up on a bait at some point. We took these things and sprayed them, soaked the baits with these, and exposed roaches. And we could not find anything other than DEET, other than a known insect repellent. Nothing stopped these products from working. Even some of the things that are even slightly repellent, things like some of the essential oils, it might have delayed things a little bit, but it never stopped anything. And so it was, to us, I would say it was shocking. First of all, after we started doing the work, it wasn't so surprising anymore. But it was really like, the takeaway from all of this is essentially, it's not go out and spray your bait with whatever you want. It's like, no, when you raise this up and you give things like competing food sources, you make it a more complex environment. These things could have compounding effects. It could, in fact, reduce consumption, or it could, in fact, make things less effective. So don't go out and intentionally spray your baits with anything. But at the same time, us as professionals, don't turn to that for a blame for failure. That is very unlikely to be the reason that your treatment is failing. More likely, it's things like resistance, improper placement, under application. Those are the kind of things that we need to be looking to. And that's why I was hoping with this work, what we get out of it is essentially, let's turn our attention to other more likely causes when we have bait failures, and stop just blaming it on bait contamination.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I guess my question next, and Mike, were you about to ask
No,
something?
no, no. I was gonna say you just took away the excuse of like 70% of technicians out there that said, "Hey, this stuff doesn't work," right? Or she must have sprayed it with something. No,
Yeah.
it's.
Yeah.
Did you put the right bait in the right place in the right amount? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Answer those 3 questions first. If the answer to any of those is no, then it probably wasn't, to your point, anything to do with bait contamination or anything along those lines. So
Exactly.
Mike and I have been technicians out there too, and I'm sure I'm not the only one to have put bait down, then sprayed something over the top and went, "Oh crap!"
yeah,
Yeah.
Whoops. So
Yeah.
no, it's not the end of the world.
It,
Maybe just need to apply more and in the correct.
yeah. No, and that's, I like, because when I frame it, I've talked about a number of different ways, but I think that's a really nice, like, simple way of explaining it too, where it's like, if you're a technician, it's like, don't use it as an excuse, but also relax. It's, if you accidentally don't purposely do it, but if you accidentally do, that's not likely going to be why something fails. That's very unlikely to be the cause of failure.
Yeah. So I guess my
Yeah.
last question is, professionally or personally, what's something that you're most excited for?
Gosh, you know, I would say some of the work that we're getting into. So I kind of mentioned some of the projects that we're working on, looking at things like sustainability, pest management. The other area I didn't touch on much, but I'm really excited, is we're starting to get into some more work that kind of overlaps between pest control and human health, the medical field. So we're starting to team up with some people working, and especially in our children's hospital here, and gearing up for some projects where we're essentially, what we're looking to do is go into homes of people, patients who have asthma, cardiovascular disease, a whole bunch of things. These are pediatric patients who are at risk for a number of things, but also happen to have cockroaches. And again, I say this is very early. We're building up to this right now, but being able to identify these patients and see if we can go in and do targeted interventions for cockroaches, something we think is driving, or at least a major player in some of these diseases, and look at, mitigation efforts, and seeing if we can see improvement in these health outcomes. It's something that I would never be able to tackle myself. I mean, my training is in entomology. I work in pest control. I can dance right up to the clinical side, but I can't go beyond. We've started pairing up with some folks here who are clinicians or work in the clinical field, in medical field. And I'm really excited to be able to translate this, because cockroaches, in my mind, focusing on them specifically, have been so undervalued in the problems they cause. We focus on the headliners, the ticks, the mosquitoes, and not to devalue. I mean, they do a ton of damage too, but we're trying to get numbers on this. I mean, there are a huge proportion. We're talking millions of people who live in low-income housing, disadvantaged communities, who are dealing with cockroaches, who are being constantly exposed to some of these things. The health effects are immense. They're hitting a disadvantaged group of society. and we're not doing a whole lot about it right now. And so I'm excited because this might shed some light on how we can improve their health, but also might add some value to our industry and kind of highlight the importance of doing good pest control. It's not just making somebody's house look pretty. It's not just getting rid of a nuisance. It's having things that actually have real, true impact on somebody's physical and mental health. I'm excited. Like I said, it's early, but I'm excited as we kind of can start exploring some of those questions. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you're not in logistics.
Yeah. I've really enjoyed it. Pest management's been really fun. I haven't said enough about it, but I mean, the people you meet, it's a really unique industry. I mean, I don't get into the business side of it because of my role, but it is neat to see companies that we work with being willing to share ideas and opportunities. They have healthy competition with each other. Even within like Lexington, where I am, there's a number of companies that they're direct competitors, but we'll go and have lunch with each other after a meeting or do things. And these are people, and you don't see that with a lot of other fields. And I think that you can be a healthy competitor, but you can still be a colleague and a friend. And it's I don't want to say it's the only industry like that, but it's unique in that sense. And it's for me to be a part of it. I really appreciate getting to be a part of that and getting to see that and getting to do my small part in helping it grow.
Awesome.
Hmm.
Well, I feel like we're gonna need a Zach part 2 at some point in time to follow up on some of this work that you guys are working on now. So, but thanks so much for spending time with us today. And like I was saying, we could probably talk to you for 3 hours, but I really appreciate your time today. And yeah, Jen, anything else?
No, part 2 sounds great. If you're
Yes.
willing, we are ready.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd love it. Thank you guys for having me.
Well, thanks again, Zach. I appreciate you, man. Hey, actually, I'll see
Yeah.
you in a couple weeks at that NView thing that you're speaking
That's
at.
right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Very good. I thank you guys for having
Have a good
me.
weekend,
Take
bud.
care.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.